Well, to the dismay of President Trump, the Federal Reserve is planning to hold off on interest rate cuts once again, even with stubborn inflation rates. The Fed made the decision citing a stabilizing labor market.
Stephen Cates joins us now. He's a financial analyst with Bankrate.com. Stephen, welcome. So first off, what does the decision by the Fed say about the strength of the economy? And moreover, how does that translate for consumers in the near term?
So the Fed was widely expected to pause the rate cutting cycle in January. So that really didn't come as a surprise. What I think was surprising was in the press conference, Jerome Powell, the chair, spoke rather confidently about the stability of the U.S. economy, saying that we're on firm footing and on a solid pace. Those are words that he's not used in many months. So that's encouraging for consumers who, up until this point, have been concerned about the labor market, and rightly so. We've seen hiring be very weak. We've seen job gains be very slow. Now, there's also inflation on the other side. And in a way, this signals that the Fed is trying to make a measured determination of how they want to approach the balance of risk between supporting the labor market and trying to fight inflation. And for the moment, they're going to wait and see whether the fight for inflation may become the bigger risk.
Yeah, speaking of the labor market, Amazon is cutting some 16,000 jobs, much of it tied to AI and efficiency. Stephen, for employees, watching these layoffs, is this a warning sign for similar jobs across the economy, or is this mostly just about Amazon and doing some restructuring?
Well, I think that this is probably mostly about Amazon. Now, there certainly have been other layoffs from Amazon, from others. And I hope we can actually spend a minute on this, because I do think that this is important to understand within the context of the national labor market. U.S. sentiment today is poor. We know this from various measurements. People are frankly anxious. They're frustrated. One of the reasons that when people hear numbers like this, 16,000 layoffs, which follows the 14,000 from Amazon back in October, when you don't have context of what that means, it can make you feel like the sky is falling, and that's a natural feeling. But I don't want to minimize the experience of these people who are getting laid off or have been laid off at all, because that's difficult. But from an economic standpoint, it's important to know with context that every month of every year, it's normal for the U.S. economy to have between 1.6 and 1.8 million layoffs every month of every year. And the long-term average over the last 25 years has been about 1.9 million layoffs every month of every year. So this is, from an economic standpoint, the national U.S. economy, a drop in the bucket. It's not indicative of a trend towards a failing labor market. This is completely normal, but it certainly makes headlines.
I appreciate the sensitivity that you said for those who have been laid off, but in the context of the greater economy, that is good to know. The president held a major event Wednesday to boast about what he calls Trump accounts. And my question to you is, how do these so-called Trump accounts actually work, and how are they different from savings options already available to parents, whether it's 529 plans or custodial accounts?
So I am a bit of a nerd about sort of financial planning opportunities, but I'm very excited about what these are. But there are certainly pros and cons to this account when you compare it to others. And it's going to really depend on what your goals are for the savings you want to make for your child. One of the biggest benefits of these Trump accounts is going to be that if you have a child born between 2025 and 2028, you're going to get a deposit from the government. And free money is free money. I encourage you to take it. You may also have the opportunity to get charitable donations from certain individuals like Michael Dell and his wife, Ray Dalio, in Connecticut, as well as yet to be named charities who may come out of the woodwork. Employers, similarly, may make contributions or match family contributions. So that kind of money is going to be, if you think about the growth it could have in the stock market over multiple decades, a transformative experience for today's children. But for parents who may be trying to decide, where do you put, my limited dollars, you have to decide, again, what's going to be most useful. If you have education as one of your primary goals, a 529 may be better. It is tax deferred, and so is this Trump account, but the withdrawals from the Trump account are not tax-free for education expenses. There's going to be a lot more details that are going to come out as this becomes available over the next 4 to 6 months or so, and these become able to be funded in July, about what this can do for families and for children in comparison to some of these other accounts.
Yeah, it's a big deal for families who maybe are not invested right now, and changing future generations' financial status. All right, Stephen Cates with Bankrate.com. Thank you.